Welcome to Truth and Lies Radio, a program dedicated to revealing the truth and exposing the lies about the destruction of your freedom and prosperity and what you can do about it. And now, your host, former Washington right-wing activist, international living, banking and asset protection author and expert, and American patriot in exile, David Finzer. David Finzer.
This is David Finzer broadcasting for the next 2 hours from the Gibraltar of the Balkans, the historic city of Novi Sad along the banks of the beautiful Danube River here in Serbia, on my 5,238th day of voluntary exile across 6 countries in protest from an ever less free America. To comment during the program until our station is finished, you can send me a Skype text message at Truth and Lies Radio, all one word, or you can email me at david@truthandliesradio.com, and it'll come up right here on my console. As soon as our new studio is finished, you'll also be able to call in toll-free from the U.S. and Canada, or Skype from around the world and join the conversation. Also, please remember to check out our Facebook and YouTube pages at Truth and Lies Radio Show. According to the big clock on truthandliesradio.com's FATCA/Taxmageddon Day countdown page, your taxes will skyrocket and your worldwide financial privacy will expire in 136 days, 12 hours, 51 minutes, and 4 seconds. Well, I think one of the most important pieces of news is gun violence, but this time it's gun violence from the left. You know, they always want to take away our guns, but it seems like their people use guns, and their people use guns with a meaning. A security guard working for the Conservative Christian Family Research Council is being recognized as the hero he is after he stopped a gunman trying to gain access to their Washington, D.C. headquarters 2 days ago. The guard, identified as Leo Johnson, was shot by 28-year-old Floyd Corkins after the gunman entered their lobby and began making statements opposing the group's policies. Law enforcement officials said Corkins' intent apparently was to gain access to their upstairs offices, where the results could well have turned deadly, especially in Washington, D.C., which has strict gun laws. But fortunately, we had an armed citizen there. After being shot, Johnson still helped subdue an armed Corkins. Witnesses said, I would say in this case, the security officer here is a hero as far as I'm concerned, and that was said by the Washington, D.C. Police Chief Kathy Lanier. He did his job. I mean, the person never made it farther than the front door. Witnesses reported that after being subdued, Corkins told Johnson, "Don't shoot me, it's not about you, it was what this place stands for." Well, that was bad grammar on his part anyway, but I suppose he was afraid of being shot, so he wasn't thinking very well. Corkins, who was taken into FBI custody, was a volunteer at a Washington Community Center for gay people, CBN News reported. In addition to his 9mm handgun, he was reportedly carrying a Chick-fil-A bag. And we all know about the Chick-fil-A brouhaha that the left has made a whole lot of. They can say anything they want about anyone, but God forbid that someone else gives an opposing point of view. After a successful surgery, fortunately, Mr. Johnson's expected to make a full recovery. According to the Christian Post, an individual with close ties to the Family Research Council said Corkins came to the door of the group's headquarters and was buzzed in by Johnson, who was sitting behind a desk in the lobby. Corkins, whom Johnson may well have mistaken for an intern, was apparently holding a Chick-fil-A bag. And when Johnson inquired what was in the bag, Corkins showed him his weapon and began firing, hitting Johnson in the arm. Now, I've been shot in the leg, and it's no fun. At that time, Johnson came from behind the desk and took the gun away from Corkins, even though he was wounded, and subdued him until the police arrived. Other pro-family leaders and groups quickly reacted to the violence, pointing out that many conservative leaders have been anticipating such attacks in response to their stand against same-sex marriage. Dan Gaynor of the Media Research Center said, If it turns out early reports are accurate and this individual did this based on politics, it's not that it's new. It's the culmination of years of lefty demonization of conservative groups, unquote. Well, it's more than that. You know, everybody forgets the so-called peace movement during the war in Vietnam, where they waged a war for peace by killing people, by kidnapping people, by blowing up things. You know, left follows the old communist morality, which is anything that advances the cause is good. You know, Lenin killed more people in his first day in control of Russia than the Tsars had total in the preceding 100 years. That may surprise you, but it's true. The left is entirely illiberal when it comes to opinions with which they do not agree. You know, in many ways, I think the left is like one big demonic cult. They are so propagandized, so brainwashed, that you cannot win by argument. You cannot persuade them. And when they don't get their way, they either turn to the government to force you to take their position, or if that doesn't work, then they turn to violence. What about, look at Northern Ireland, the Provo, these provisional IRA, they were Maoists, they weren't Catholics. This is what the left has done for a long time. It's not surprising, it'll get worse. This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies Radio. When we come back, we'll talk about something Obama signed. In case you missed hearing me talking about it, or missed it in the news, last Friday night, Mr. Obama hid in the shadows and signed into law the Presidential Appointment Efficiency and Streamlining Act. Senate Bill S679 exempts certain senior-level presidential appointees from Senate confirmation hearings. According to lawmakers, it's all part of a new, more efficient government. Gee, it sounds just like Hitler and a few other people have said. The law allows half-wits, corrupt cronies, shady czars, unknown and unaccountable to the American people to be placed into very senior government positions. What's most telling is the way this was done. The cowards in Congress had Joe Lieberman, a respectable Democrat, even though he was elected as an independent. He caucuses with the Democrat, and he's a long-term Democrat, who's retiring, so he doesn't have to face the people again, to be the primary spokesman to sell this con job to the American people. But I don't think we're blind, and there is a recorded vote, and all the villains that voted for that hiding behind that good old gentleman. Now this is really serious, because it's one more incremental step in which Obama is turning himself, or his office at least, from being the chief executive of a republic into an imperial presidency, making himself emperor. Now, some people think if he gets reelected, there may never be another election. Other people who believe in conspiracies think that, well, it'll just be somebody else who will continue to do the same thing. Some people think that there's going to be an October surprise and there will be a terrorist incident when the elections will be postponed. I think Mr. Obama is capable of anything, but the point is, Congress is going along with it. I don't blame Obama as much as I blame the members of Congress. He is grasping for power, but at least he's mostly doing it openly. And the members of Congress who are our elected representatives, who are sent to Washington to protect our rights, have sold us down the river. They sold us down the river with the Patriot Act, which none of them read before it was passed. They sold us down the river with the NDAA, which none of them read before it was passed. They sold us down the river with TARP, the big bailouts. They've done it over and over again, and while Obama is certainly the capo di tutti capi of these gangsters. In fact, Congress is responsible, and that's where the focus has to be if America is going to be saved, and I personally think it's probably too late. Since Obama and his advisors openly consider the Constitution a flawed document, and I consider it a great document that had a few tiny flaws that have been exploited for well over 150 years to create the monster government that we have now. But I can't help but wonder what Obama's version of the Constitution might look like. In a moment of obvious whimsy amidst a very serious report, Sean Paul wrote in the Western Center for Journalism's daily report a possible preamble to the Obama Constitution. And this is a quote, these are not my words. "We, the subjects of the divided states of America, in order to form a more socialist union, establish anarchy, ensure domestic insanity, destroy personal and national defense, promote the general welfare program, and secure the institution of slavery for ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the divided states of America." Well, I would have just changed two things. Instead of divided states of America, I would have just called it the democracy of America, pretending since the states barely exist now, and I would have used the word serfdom rather than slavery, because I think that's really the form it's going to take. Barack Obama, don't have any question about it, I think is probably the most evil president in the history of the United States, at least since Abraham Lincoln. Having said that, however, I don't think that what the Republicans are putting up as an alternative is very damn good either. So now we'll switch over. Well, let's talk about the GOP for a while. Maybe it's the GFP. I don't know. It could be, and depending on what the F stands for, I might agree with it. Anyway, Mitt Romney said he's never paid less than 13% of his income in taxes during the past decade, which is the most complete explanation of his tax returns to date. So what? The tax rate, the marginal tax rate for the average middle-class American is 25%. Romney's paid half of that because he's got dozens, scores, hundreds, maybe thousands of smart lawyers and accountants and all kinds of money offshore while at the same time he attacks offshore. And this is just a joke. I'm sure that his tax returns are properly in order. Harry Reid is, to call Harry Reid a liar is like saying Neil Armstrong was an astronaut. I mean, they're both so obvious that it doesn't really take very much intelligence. I think someone with a 40 IQ could probably figure that out. And his claim that Romney's paid no taxes in some years, I don't believe is true. Now, I think Romney has exploited every loophole he can, and there is no responsibility for anyone to pay more taxes than those to which they're legally obligated, but Romney is using his vast wealth to work the system in ways that you and I cannot do because of the special privileges that the government gives big corporations, foreign corporations, and if you've got enough money, you can buy enough attorneys and do anything. Now, the Obama campaign has been attacking Romney over his taxes and wanting 10 years of tax returns produced. They just today, I think, said, well, they would be willing to accept 5 years. Now, I think that it's pretty incredible that a president who has or a man acting as president who has sealed every one of his own records, his college transcripts, his school records, his birth records, every record you can think of, he has had them sealed. And he is laying down the rules on what his opponent has to produce. It's pretty obvious to me that if Romney, being a high-profile figure, and Obama having been in power for 3.5 years, if they really had anything on him, they would have the IRS go after him. Certainly if Obama wants to know about his tax returns, he can just go and call up somebody in the IRS and get the information, all of the privacy statutes to the contrary notwithstanding. To quote Romney, at least so you hear what he said, I did go back and look at my past taxes over the past 10 years, and I never paid less than 13%. I think the most recent year is 13.6 or something like that. Obviously, he's great with figures. So I paid taxes every single year, he told reporters yesterday. He says he's also given generously to charity, and that including those contributions, he's given up more than 20% of his income each year. Now, I believe that to be true because all Mormons are required to give 10% to the church in Salt Lake City, plus to support their local, what they call ward, which anybody else would call a parish or a local church. So I'm sure he's given 20% of his income or more each year. Thus far, he's released his 2010 tax return and says he'll release his 2011 return before the November 6th election. I think it's a tempest in a teapot, and I really think, if you'll forgive the double entendre, it's the pot calling the kettle black. Because with everything Obama has hidden, he is in no position to demand openness from anyone. I still don't believe, that Barack Obama is a natural-born American citizen. If he were, he would prove it. If he didn't have a whole lot of skeletons in his closet, he wouldn't have all of the records sealed at every conceivable level. You know, I've been going back and getting records from my family as part of putting my ancestry together, and it's amazing. All of my records are there. We've gone back to 1605 and found records. And Mr. Obama can't produce just his personal records? I'm sorry, I do not believe it. It's just smoke and mirrors. And speaking of smoke and mirrors, we'll talk about how the Republicans are using smoke and mirrors as well and trying to portray Paul Ryan as something he is not. This is David Finns for Truth and Lies Radio. I'll be back after the news, so stay tuned. This is David Finzer. You know, I can't help but be saddened that 2 more people have been killed on this blue-green attacks. Once again, I keep on asking the question, why is the United States and its allies, mostly Great Britain, why are we in Afghanistan? They don't want us. It was the terrorists that were killing us for several years. Now it's police and military officers that we trained. In this case, they had just given a policeman a new gun as a president, and what does he do? He turns it on them and kills them. It's not a place that we should be. We have no strategic interest there. They don't even have oil. You can't even use that as an excuse. The United States should just get out and let the Afghans go back to what they've been doing for 1,000 years and do so well, which is tribal warfare and kill each other. Seal the damn borders around it and let the country just go to hell. Anyway, almost everyone in America seems to believe that Paul Ryan is a fiscal conservative, a bold and new-thinking budget hawk. After all, he's the author of The Path to Prosperity, the plan to repeal Obamacare, to turn Medicaid program for low-income Americans over to the states, and create a private insurance option for Medicare beneficiaries starting in 2023, assuming America's still around in 2023. This is all, this, for example, is typical of what happens in election years. They make promises of plans that they cannot possibly guarantee because they're so far away, they will not be in office, and there is nothing to prevent any intervening Congress from reversing it. It's a perfect example is the Roth IRA. You pay your taxes now, stick your money, lock your money up in the Roth IRA, and the government has promised it won't tax you when it comes out unless they change their mind. His plan would also turn food stamps and other federal programs for the poor into block grants to the states with limits on the growth of those programs. Now, how is that different from when from the Democrats' infringement of the rights of the states, when the federal government is dictating to the states how it's going to do it? If Republican voters have any doubt about Ryan's commitment to budget austerity, they need to only listen to the outcry, the screaming, the wailing and gnashing of teeth that Ryan's path to prosperity will be a road to the poorhouse for elderly and low-income Americans that the Democrats are putting in every commercial, in every press release, all around the world to scare old people and to convince everyone that Ryan really is out to get the old and the low income. Well, first of all, what the elderly ought to be thinking about is if they're forced into Obamacare, some doctor who is a government doctor is going to decide whether they live or die, is going to decide whether they're worth treating or ought to be euthanized. So you think about that, that's a very bad option. But in fact, the truth is Ryan's voting record shows absolutely consistent across-the-board support for big spending programs that enlarge the role of the federal government, especially when they're promoted by a Republican in the White House. Big programs promoted by the Democrats are bad, but big programs promoted by the Republicans are good. Well, to me, that means Ryan is a politician, not a statesman, and obviously doesn't believe in the Constitution either. Ryan voted for all of the very expensive budget-busting items during the administration of George Dummy W. Bush, including the No Child Left Behind Act, which has no basis under the Constitution, and the prescription drug benefit known as Medicare Part D, which has been described by many as the largest single expansion of the welfare state since Lyndon Baines Johnson's Great Society con. Worse. Ryan voted to create the new Department of Homeland Security, including the Transportation Security Administration that has harassed air travelers while making aircraft safe from shoes, belt buckles, and grandma's knitting needles. He voted for the Patriot Act, giving the government enhanced powers for warrantless snooping into the lives of American citizens as well as foreign nationals. Ryan also voted for TARP, the Troubled Assets Relief Program that bailed out the too-big-to-fail financial institutions, which was a slap in the face to every small and medium-sized businessman and woman in all of America. And this was what inspired, TARP was what inspired the Tea Party rebellion against big government and crony capitalism, and yet they're lining up behind this Ryan guy. It makes no sense to me at all. He backed the auto bailout that turned GM into Government Motors. Like Romney, Ryan has zero foreign policy credentials. He probably can find Russia on a map. That's real easy. It's the biggest country. He can probably find Canada and a few other places. But, so what? He's a congressman with almost no foreign experience. He has no record of military service to point to in the election campaign. Like Romney, Ryan swallowed whole the Bush-Cheney line on Iraq and supported the decision to invade and occupy that country in a absolutely unnecessary war that cost more than 4,000 Americans' lives and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives, as if they don't count, somehow they don't count, and has added roughly $1 trillion to our soaring national debt. Ryan's budget cuts call for zero reduction in military spending, despite the continued presence of U.S. troops in about 130, that's right, 130 countries around the world, most of which have no bearing on our own national security. There's 190 some countries, I think, last time I looked. So the United States has U.S. troops in 2/3 of them. And you wonder why the world doesn't like us? Even more troubling is Ryan's vote last December in favor of the National Defense Authorization Act. The legislation allows the military to take us all into custody. This year, Ryan voted against an amendment to remove that provision from the law. We'll continue talking about Paul Ryan and his shortfalls when we come back in just a few moments. I'm back, and I'm still talking about the fraud, Paul Ryan, just in case you missed it, because I was trying to get as much out as I could in that segment. Ryan voted last December in favor of the National Defense Authorization Act. So, just so you know exactly what I'm talking about, this is the legislation that included a provision authorizing the president or the man acting as president to use the military to arrest suspected terrorists or associated persons, including U.S. citizens apprehended in the United States, and hold them indefinitely without charges and without trial. This year, Ryan voted against an amendment to remove that provision from the law. Paul Ryan is, in short, a typical Richard Nixon, George W. Bush type silk stocking Republican whose selection as vice presidential candidate is being trumpeted as a triumph by many of the same Republicans who are doing the best thing they can to distance themselves from the disaster of the administration of George W. Bush. Finally, the Ryan budget, while including a number of unspecified cuts in entitlement programs, would push overall spending higher than current levels. Now, how the hell does that make him a budget cutter? Despite its optimistic revenue projections, the Congressional Budget Office projects the Ryan plan will lead to a balanced budget by 2040, assuming the U.S. still has an economy at that point. The bottom line is that Romney-Ryan versus Obama means only a little less socialism and no balanced budget for at least 28 years. Remember, the lesser of two evils is still evil, and the Republican and Democrat candidates are not very different in enough things to make a difference for me to make a choice. I will continue to expose the lies and tell the truth about both of them, and I'll also continue to talk about Gary Johnson and the Libertarians. It's a lot harder to talk about them because there's less information, because the mainstream media, of course, doesn't want to let Gary Johnson be heard any more than they wanted Ron Paul to be heard. Changing the subject completely, feeding the hungry is a biblical command direct from the mouth of Christ. However, to go above and beyond that is to feed the poor when the local government demands that the poor go hungry. In this case, a black woman from Chester Township, Pennsylvania, is going to be fined $600 per day if she does not stop feeding poor children prepackaged food on her own property. DelcoTimes.com reports on this inspiring act of defiance to help those who are less fortunate. Angela Prattis, a township resident, said she will continue handing out free prepackaged meals to underprivileged children in her Toby Farms neighborhood, despite a notification from the local fascist township officials that she'll face fines for doing so. I'm not stopping, she said. She's been distributing meals she receives from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia to about 60 children from a gazebo on her property this summer. Her property, she's not charging anything, she's giving it away, and the government doesn't like it. She says, these kids are hungry. I'm not tearing down the community. I'm keeping the children out of harm's way and maybe keeping them away from crime. But her actions potentially violate zoning laws, which says that she's not allowed to distribute food in that area of the neighborhood. Really? They will allow her to distribute it in other places, but not there? Where is the equal protection of the law? A nearby resident gave a call to the township council, I guess because they didn't like the kids hanging around getting the food, so some miser, some Grinch, some miserable bastard started this all off because somebody else was doing a job that needed to be done and feeding hungry children. I'm a hell of a lot more concerned about hungry children in America than I am sending money to left-wing groups that allegedly feed hungry children in far-off countries that very few of us have ever heard of. The township council chairman asked the township solicitor, Stephen Polaha, to investigate the matter, and in response to council 2 weeks ago, Polaha returned an opinion stating that in terms of the township zoning laws, the distribution was, quote, not permitted without a variance. Well, the fact that the council didn't immediately, on its own motion, grant the variance shows what a bunch of miserly, rotten bastards they are. A variance would cost Angela Prattis $1,000 in legal fees in order to help keep feeding the children in her gazebo on her property. However, the report does state that she is allowed to move the gazebo off the property and over to a parking lot on the street. The report doesn't say who owns the parking lot, if she has permission from the lot owner, or even why the gazebo must be moved in order for her to keep feeding the kids. I'll make my listeners a deal. For every dollar that anyone will pledge toward that paying for that variance, I'll match that dollar. So if you come up with $500, I'll come up with $500 so she can afford the variance. That's the least that we can do, and show those miserable bastards on the town council just exactly what scum they are, and show that miserable neighbor who was looking out their window and complaining exactly what kind of person they are. They ought to be condemned. Now I'm going to tread on really controversial waters. On June 1st, 2001, Portugal decriminalized every imaginable drug from marijuana to cocaine to heroin. Some thought Lisbon would become a drug tourist haven. Others predicted usage rates among the youths to surge. 11 years later, it turns out they were both wrong. Over a decade has passed since Portugal changed its philosophy from labeling drug users as criminals to labeling them as people affected by a disease. This time lapse has allowed statistics to develop, and in time has made Portugal an example to follow. Now let me make it perfectly clear, unlike Bill Clinton, I'm not going to cavil at all. I have never used illegal drugs. I've never tried marijuana. I grew up in a German household. I think they put beer in my baby bottle. I drink, I smoke cigars, and I smoke a pipe. But that's all I smoke, and the only drugs that go into my body come from a doctor. Portugal is decriminalized, meaning drug possession, distribution, and use is still illegal, and while the distribution and trafficking is still a criminal offense, possession and use is moved out of the criminal courts and into a special court where each offender's situation is judged by legal experts, psychologists, and social workers. Treatment and further action is decided in these courts where addicts and drug use is treated as a public health service rather than a criminal offense. The resulting effect is a drastic reduction in addicts, which Portuguese officials and reports highlighting that this number at 100,000 before the new policy was enacted has been halved in the following 10 years. Portugal's drug usage rates are now among the lowest of EU member states, according to the same report. Drug-related diseases, including STDs and overdoses, have been reduced, even more than usage rates, which experts believe is the result of the government offering treatment with no threat of legal ramifications to addicts. These statistics, which have taken 11 years to develop and accurately depict the effects of the change, seem to be worth noting. In America, something like 85% of all federal inmates are in prison for drug-related crimes, costing the taxpayer each $35,000 or more per year to maintain them in prison. Other alternatives need to be discussed. For policymakers or people simply interested in the topics, cases like Portugal are a great place to start. I only have a little time left, but I want to point out one more nasty thing about Obama. It's hardly news that he hangs around with bad guys, but he also allows aid to countries that use children as soldiers. In late 2008, Congress passed and Bush signed the Child Soldiers Prevention Act, but Obama has exploited a loophole in that act to allow American money to be given to countries that use children as soldiers. That is probably one of the most despicable things he's ever done. Perhaps most egregious of all was permitting the newly formed country of South Sudan to receive aid, even though it was clearly violating the terms of that law. Well, now we're at the top of the first hour. When we come back, I'll be joined with some of the gang on Freaky Friday, and we're going to be talking about movies and how they affect society. Stay tuned. This is David Finzer broadcasting for the second hour from the Gibraltar of the Balkans, the historic city of Novi Sad along the banks of the beautiful Danube River here in Serbia. And as I keep on reminding people, that's not Siberia. It's a lot warmer than that here. Today is my 5,238th day of voluntary exile across 6 countries in protest from an ever less free America. While our studio is being finally put together, I think, to comment during the show, you can send me a Skype text message at Truth and Lies Radio, all one word, or you can email me at david@truthandliesradio.com, and it'll show up right here on my console. As soon as our new studio is finished, you'll also be able to call in toll-free from the U.S. and Canada or Skype and join the conversation. Also, remember to check out our Facebook and YouTube pages at Truth and Lies Radio Show. Well, today is Freaky Friday, sort of when anything goes, when we discuss Finzer's Generation Chasm. And we have a little bit different group today. We have Tim Sutton from the Scott and Tim Show. The other half, I guess you guys are about half, Tim, because you're short and a little wide, and Scott's tall and thin, so that makes up half, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm kind of working on that wide part, but we'll see how it goes. Okay.
Then we have our European correspondent, full of all kinds of interesting ideas, Ollie Neville, with us. Hello, Ollie.
Hello, David.
And standing in for Scott Chambers, who is sick and in bed, and I'm not talking about his mind, I'm talking about his throat. We have our Money Monday economics correspondent, Mike Gard, because he likes movies. And today, of course, the topic is going to be movies, and I guess we'll probably talk about how they have affected American culture. But before we start, it's important to note that we actually have like 4 generations represented here, and because Ollie is 21, I think, and Tim, today it's Tim's birthday. How old are we, Tim?
I am 31, but I'm still younger than you,
well,
David, and I'm glad to have Mike on the show today because unlike Scott, Mike doesn't tend to take up for you as much as Scott does, so that works out to in my favor.
Well, I've been told that I need to insult you like every 15 minutes, Tim, just to stand in for Scott appropriately.
Yeah, that's true. That's right.
And then Mike is 43, and I'm 108 or something like that.
Well, I was going to say, David, it's nice that you call them movies. I expected you to say, today we're going to talk about talkies.
Yes, right, talkies. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's obvious that movies, and maybe we expand it to TV, have affected American culture. Hollywood has changed the world's perception of how they see America, and I think it's changed how Americans see themselves. I saw one poll that, based on movies, more people believe in aliens and believe in space aliens than believe in God, and that's got to come from movies and television. So. Anyway, let's talk about movies, our favorites, movies we hate, love, how they've affected it. Tim, why don't you start off for once?
Okay. Well, basically, movies in general, in my realm of movies, is I like the old westerns, and I dig a lot of the new movies that kind of have gone back to pick up and reinvent the old movies. I guess that's lack of creativity, but if you see nowadays, you see a lot of remakes, and I agree that some of the old classics are better than most.
Well, what's your favorite movie, or your top two?
My favorite movie. Oh man, it's hard to. I guess because I am in radio, there's a movie called Pirate Radio out there. That's one of my top on my list. The Big Lebowski is on the top of my list. The Fear of Loathing in Las Vegas is on the top of my list. Those have to be those three have to be really the top. And I guess and anything to do with Nicolas Cage. For some reason, I have some man crush on Nicolas Cage. So
like The Apprentice, you like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, wasn't it?
Oh, that was pretty bad.
That
was pretty bad.
There's something about
Wicker Man was bad too.
Oh, good lord! Yeah, that was a remake too.
There's something about Nicolas Cage that when I see him, I just want to reach right out into the screen and punch him.
Well, he's not your standard, leading man-looking guy. He's not particularly attractive, is he? I mean.
Well, I don't care about that. There's just something about him that
I like about him.
I liked him in Valley Girl. That just shows you how old I am.
Raising Arizona, probably one of the classics.
That's a great movie. Yeah, the Coen brothers, all their movies are good.
God, I thought that was the stupidest movie I've ever seen.
Ollie, I'm just surprised you saw it at all.
Oh, shut up. Ollie, come on. What's your favorite?
My favorite film by far has to be Fight Club. I absolutely adore that film.
That's a very libertarian movie.
It was. It was like when I watched it, and I was at a friend's house, and we'd had a few drinks, so my mind wasn't quite as perceptive as it might have been. And when the twist came, I was just so shocked. I mean, I was.
But there's a twist. What?
Okay, well, good. Anyway, Mike, you want to get in quick? Well, we got 10 seconds.
No.
No. Okay. My favorite movie is the original Miracle on 34th Street. We'll talk about movies more, their effect on American culture, when we come back in a few minutes. And we're back. I am, of course, representing the voice of sanity. We have Tim Sutton from the Scott and Tim Show, who's representing the 30s, the people who are age 30, not the 1930s. I probably represent them better. We have Ollie Neville, my European co-host, who's representing people in their 20s. We have Mike Gard, our economic co-host, who is representing all those people who are middle-aged, short, and are balding.
Yes, thank you.
And, I wanted to go back for a minute, Ollie. Loving the movie The Fight Club, has anybody ever said that's a little strange?
Well, I really loved Fight Club, and I loved the twist. So I went out and bought myself the book and read it, but I didn't get the same sort of shock because I already knew the plot twist. So I was thinking, I was like, how can I recreate this twist? And I suddenly hit upon it, the perfect idea. I would get a hypnotist to hypnotize me, make me forget the plot of Fight Club, and then I'd be, and I'd watch it again, and I'd be totally shocked. So I managed to contact some sort of hypnotherapist. He was like some kind of psychiatrist hypno guy, and I was like, can you hypnotize me and make me forget things? And he was like, well, sort of, what are you talking about? And I said that I wanted to rewatch Fight Club, and he basically just replied to me in the email saying that I was sort of emotionally disturbed, and this was a big indication about my my life and like how I was unfulfilled because I was trying to rewatch films, and basically sort of psychoanalyzed me to be an absolute nutter, which as everyone knows, is completely untrue.
That's crazy talk.
So I was just trying to rewatch a film, and then I just got psychoanalyzed.
So did he not hypnotize you then?
No, he refused to. He said it was a waste of his time. He said,
so here you go, Ollie. This is your reply back to him. Send the reply back and say, "Hey, man, it's not about the psychosis that I want to take a place again and revisit again. It's the fact that I want to forget how hot Brad Pitt was in that movie, and I want to remember it one more time. And I guarantee you that way, he'll go ahead and do it, so you can rewatch the movie in full spin."
When he's putting the gloves on and he opens the door and he says, "You want to have a go?" That's a classic scene.
You have to admit, though, that any movie that Quentin Tarantino puts his hands on is also great hits, such as Kill Bill and Pulp Fiction, and those have those same plot twists, just like the movie you're talking about, the Fight Club movie.
Yeah, I mean Reservoir Dogs too. That's classic.
With more shirts on, in most of them, but
yeah, and darker suits.
That's why I can't.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, you haven't given us your favorite movie.
Well, that's interesting because there's a difference between, I think, what you think is like the best movie you've ever seen versus a movie that you'd watch over and over and over again, right? I mean, I think the best movie I've ever seen actually is too emotional to watch all the time, which is Schindler's List. I mean, it's a great movie, and I've watched it, I think, 3 times. But that's about all I got because, you have to set aside the whole weekend because you're going to be kind of depressed. But movies I can watch over and over again are like comedies like Animal House, great movie, or a musical like Sound of Music. Of course, now I have kids. See, I'm the only one on the panel here that has children, which is great.
To speak of.
Well, of which we know, right? Oh. But every movie that Pixar puts out is fantastic, right? I mean, they hit the top 10 every year with a new movie. From Nemo to Toy Story, all the Toy Stories were fantastic. So I like them as well. But probably my favorite movie to watch on any given Saturday, if I got nothing to do, Excalibur. That's a great movie.
Really?
Well, the music, they got the Carmina Burana playing. It's all, and it's a great story, classic story.
And there's fighting and war and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's
which
awesome.
Is way different from Sound of Music. But I just want to revisit
you don't watch them one after the other.
I guess part of my problem with modern movies is when I was growing up.
By modern, can you put a time frame on that? I mean, that's really relative, right?
I'm just sound. There's your time frame.
I mean, because Excalibur is 30 years old. I'm just saying.
Color.
Casablanca, just because they spit out a couple of Italian words doesn't mean that it's one of the greatest movies of all time just because there's no color and no sound.
Yeah.
Well, now wait, I saw Ted Turner put color in Casablanca.
Yeah, he did.
And I think
Casablanca Turner to mess it up,
Casablanca was a great movie, but when I was younger, a long time ago, just to get it out before one of the other three of you do, the good guys always won.
Well, that's not really realistic, is it?
Well, it's not realistic, but if you're going to propagandize, I think it's a good thing to propagandize to people that right triumphs over wrong, that good triumphs over evil.
I mean, it was so much that way that when Hitchcock had his show, Hitchcock Presents, right?
Right.
And the bad guy would end up getting away with it in the end. They made him come back on after the commercial break to say, "You'll be glad to know that they caught the criminal the next week trying to flee in Niagara Falls."
Well, but you got to admit, I see where you're going with this, Spencer. I hate the fact that when I watch a movie and it doesn't turn out to the good that I'm used to, it kind of leaves you pissed off to a certain extent, unless you're twisted like Ollie and you want the bad guy to win. But, I mean, that's just how it goes.
It's more interesting when the bad guy wins. There's always this great tale of good versus evil, and it's so predictable to have the bad guy win and to see that that things can go bad. It's just,
okay.
There's just
I'll
something
give you that.
fantastic about it.
Yeah, but
what we need to do is I'm going to go ahead and start it on your front, Ollie. 007 has to die in a movie. I'm just saying. I mean, before you can start changing American movies, some British actor needs to die first.
Yeah, well, 007's been killed off by the producers how many times? Every time it reincarnates as somebody else.
Hey, that's a good story. Who's the best 007?
Roger Moore.
Sean Connery.
No way,
Sean
Roger
Connery,
Moore. What are you thinking?
Because he was a saint before that, so I liked him.
Who cares? His movies, his Bond was so cheesy. he was always a caricature of himself.
I suppose you like the guy who only did it one in Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then was such
George Lazenby.
And was such a jerk that they wouldn't continue him.
Which is the guy that set someone on fire during the film? It was one of the guys who only appeared. Was that him, or was it Timothy Dalton?
Timothy Dalton was in a couple.
Yeah, Timothy Dalton was in a
couple.
couple.
There was one where he was really gritty and he tortured someone to death by burning him, and they
really
sort of stopped that.
Maybe that was Lazenby. I don't know. Lazenby did one, but I think that was for
Her Majesty's Secret Service.
It was David Niven did.
But I thought it was good. I like that. I like this sort of Daniel Craig now, where he's a bit more gritty. But
I like Daniel Craig too.
I like the one before him though was back to being cheesy Roger Moore.
Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, Pierce Brosnan.
Well, he was also short.
Cheesy again.
What's wrong with the short Bond? Discrimination, Tim.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, come on. Bond can be short. Bond can be short.
Well, sure, he could probably be a Eurasian redneck too, but I'm not. Is that next?
We're still doing Bond. I mean, because why don't we just have another guy? I mean, because we got Jason Bourne, right? I mean, it's pretty much the same basic kind of stuff.
Well, the new Bourne movies, though, Mike, has changed characters on it.
Well, that's true.
It's going back to showing that there was a group of Bournes, these Bourne identity type.
Yeah, I mean, they could have just used another name, couldn't they? I mean, that's kind of silly.
Yeah,
my favorite thing in James Bond, my favorite actor in James Bond actually was Q.
Well, he was played by the same guy most of the time.
Yeah, till the end when he finally died because he was about 108. He was even older than me.
Is that possible?
The other character that's remained the same is the Queen.
Possible.
The Queen has remained the same character.
Yeah, the Queen has remained the same character. I like the one where they have Margaret Thatcher somebody playing Margaret Thatcher.
I guess it wasn't Meryl Streep.
From Russia with Love. It was in that one. See, I remember.
I just caught on to something, and I almost let it. I almost let it slip my mind before making comment on it. The reason the Queen is because she's been the same for every movie. She's been alive that long. I just realized
Tim, you're
that.
catching up. That's
great. She's the same.
Very good, Tim. You know, Tim. Since I've known you now for 7 months or so, you've actually realized there's something beyond the borders of Alabama.
Yeah, I agree. I know. I just.
Tim is an international traveler, sir. He's been to Eastern Europe.
Yes, he's been to Serbia.
Exactly.
And he knows how to make kimchi.
And it looks just like Alabama.
Yeah, that's kind of disappointing, When you travel the world and you realize, you know what, it's not nearly as exotic as you think, because everywhere they have green lights and red lights, and they have double yellow lines, and traffic all works the same. They have exits and on-ramps to freeways. I mean, really.
Yeah, they didn't even. I was disappointed. They don't even drive on the wrong side of the road. That's what I was expecting. I was expecting at least drive on the wrong side of the road.
Come on, Al, are you going to defend that? We got 60 seconds.
What? I mean, you say wrong side of the road.
Oh, I know.
We invented this stuff. We're the guys that tell it. You guys are all wrong. You just want to be contrarian because, you just can't accept that we're right on everything.
Well, you have to admit, in the States, you do drive on the right side of the road.
Yeah, but
right, Ollie? Okay. Well, then obviously the opposite of the right side is the wrong side.
Right. Very good.
Hey, I'm sorry that the draft today that you guys selected what side of the road depended on what horse flagellated first. So, I mean, that's just part of it.
Actually, Tim, it goes all the way back to nights when you passed on the right. You passed so that your right hand was against their right hand because that was your sword arm. That's where it goes to historically.
Oh, the American guy had his arm cut off.
Yeah, well, could be. Well, no, he could just use the gun with either hand. We'll be back in a few minutes to continue the insanity. Well, I'm back with Tim Sutton from the Scott and Tim Show, Ollie Neville, our European co-host, and Mike Garrett, our economic co-host, and we are talking about movies and TV and their effect on culture. I'm not much of a movie buff, and one of the reasons, I guess, is so many movies are based on books. And after I read the books and then watch the movies, I end up getting angry. There was one movie that was made from a Tom Clancy book that was so bad.
The one with Ben Affleck, right?
I don't know. I don't remember. But it was...
See, that's why I enjoy being from the South. We're not expected to read, so we just go ahead and watch the movie, and we're never disappointed.
Ah, okay.
So, that's just that's one of the good things about being from here.
But, okay, but... anyway, And there was.
I know you were really upset about the Twilight movies, weren't you, David? Because they weren't true to the book. Is that right?
There was one Clancy movie based on a Clancy book. It was so bad that even though Clancy had a financial interest in the movie, he publicly condemned it as just being, completely made up and just using his title.
Sean Connery was in Hunt for Red October. Now that was really good. Some things in here don't react too well to bullets.
Well, that was pretty funny when he was speaking Russian at the beginning.
It was pretty good though. And then that was a nice transition they had into English. He was talking to the guy.
I will say this though, I have read one book and I was disappointed. Well, I've read more than one book, but anyways, I read this book that transposed into a movie. It was the Silence of the Lambs when it first came out. I can remember I was 14 when I read it. And it kind of creeped me out because even in a 14-year-old mind, I was fathoming way worse than what the movie came up with Jodie Foster in it. So
really, because Anthony Hopkins was downright scary in that movie. I mean, he was nightmare stuff. Yeah.
But they can't even make movies made based on comic books follow the comic book character.
Speaking of which, The Walking Dead, which is a series that's on AMC in the States, it's based on a comic book series, and it's excellent.
Really?
Yeah, it's a great show.
The only one
The Walking Dead is incredible, and then Mike would bring that up because a lot of it's filmed in Georgia.
It's in Atlanta, yeah. I recognize a lot of the scenery. It's really cool.
Yeah. And it is. It's one of my favorite series to watch, and I'm really pumped up for October when they come back out.
Me too. You see casting calls in the Atlanta paper. Come be a zombie.
Me and Scott have actually thought about going over and getting in on one of the casting calls because a friend of ours does casting for it.
Oh, nice.
And you'd make such a great zombie, Tim. I mean,
it'd be good. He wouldn't need too much makeup, so it'd be quite cheap for the team.
Put some dark makeup on Tim's
over there, Holly.
There are mornings I feel like a zombie. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. The only problem is I think they have their Asian quota on that show, so I couldn't get in on that.
Because they got the one guy, Glenn. That's it. That's the quota.
Yeah, one guy, Glenn. Because that's all that lives. Have you noticed that? There's no Asian zombies. Yeah. It kind of freaked me out a little bit. I was like, okay. So
why do you think that is? Is there something about the culture that just they? I don't know.
They just don't taste very good.
We taste like chicken, man. Come on.
Yeah. See, Ollie could never play the part of a zombie because he could never keep his mouth shut, and he'd have to do his own interpretation of what the zombie was, regardless of what the director said.
Well, I want to know what a British zombie sounds like. Do they have an accent still? I mean, how do you go with a British accent? I don't know.
Hooray!
All right, I was looking up last year's movies, right? Because I was gonna stump Fenzer with the movies that he has not seen, right? And I was going to go through the list, but then I started looking at the list, and did you guys know that the top 9 movies last year at the box office were all either sequels or part of a franchise of sequels?
Yes. The only one that didn't was there was a new movie that released this year that wasn't part of a sequel that actually made the list, right, Mike? Well, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, this is from 2011, so this is from last year. The top 9 were all sequels or parts of continuing sequels. Number 10 though is even sort of because it was Thor, and if you put that in the context of the other Avenger type stuff, I mean that's still sort of a sequel. And then of course Planet of the Apes, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, that's of course ongoing. Captain America, that's number 12. The first movie is number 13, which was The Help, which is an actual new movie.
Yeah, and it was pretty good. I mean, it caught a lot of flack, especially up north. Where they still like to think that slavery never happened and never was part of, and then when it moved into servant help, they don't want to nobody wants to see that. At least they don't want to recommend.
I want to know if David has seen any of these series or franchises, right? Harry Potter. I know you said you saw the first one.
I've seen one. I think I've seen actually 2.
Okay, because that was number 1 last year. Transformers, have you seen any of those?
No, that all I've seen is toy commercials.
Well, that one's really good.
And then of course I know you're a big fan of the Twilight series, but I mean the movies would probably ruin the books for you.
Oh yeah. Terrible.
He's giving me a look that could kill, Tom.
I must admit that
he's all about sparkly vampires and werewolves,
So you're familiar with the Twilight series, though, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
Fortunately.
All right, The Hangover. There was part 1 and then part 2.
I've seen lots of hangovers in my life.
Actually, that one would fit. I think really that Finzer you should break down Mike, bring over Hangover.
You should watch that one.
And
I
let
agree.
him watch it.
I mean,
it's the same movie. Both 1 and 2 are the same movie.
I saw The Hangover Tuesday morning. My Slava Day was Monday. There was lots of hangovers Tuesday morning.
That is true. Now, any of the Pirates of the Caribbean, have you seen any of those movies?
No, because I've hated anything Johnny Depp is in. Is he still in the Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yes, of course he is. He is the Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, without him, there would be no...
He hasn't been any good since 21 Jump Street.
Okay, hang on. No, you cannot go back to that. You gotta go. You gotta rent and watch, or you gotta pull over, get it on Netflix or whatever hack pirate thing you have over there in Serbia, and pull up Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It will give you an all new respect for Johnny Depp.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Pretty true to
really
the Hunter S. Thompson stuff, right? Yeah. Fast and the Furious. Did you see any of those movies?
No.
Vin Diesel. Okay. Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise.
I saw a couple of those.
Okay, well, because the first one of those was done in like '96.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not kidding. I looked it up. It was 1996. The Cars. You know, the Disney movie Cars.
No.
Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr.
Of course not, because I hate Robert Downey Jr.
I tell you what, those movies are stylistically really cool. I can't understand a thing the guy is saying.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
See, part of it is I
also to translate sometimes.
I also pick movies based on whether I like the actor or not in their politics, so that leaves a very limited number of movies outside of John Wayne movies.
I'm sure you've seen Braveheart then.
Yes, I have. Anyway.
Ollie loves Braveheart.
Yes.
Sorry, don't get me started.
Okay, we'll be back for one more segment of this madness in just a few minutes. Okay, we're back with our final segment with the gang, and I think it's fair, since it's 3 Americans here, 3 Southerners in fact, I think it's time that we let Ollie tell us about the British films that he thinks are better than American films, or outstanding films that are films of note.
Well, obviously Britain does everything better than America ever, and one of my favourite British films. I have a bigger empire. I mean, according to the world. Anyway, V for Vendetta. I love that. That was such a great story about the individual against the state.
I love that too.
That was
good.
You saw that one?
I have it. I watch it regularly.
Really?
Yes.
Do you have a Guy Fawkes mask?
No.
Oh. I think you should have one.
Guy Fawkes is Catholic. I'm Orthodox. Go on, Ollie.
I guess you won't have heard of this one, but a film by Shane Meadows called This Is England. Anyone heard of that?
No.
It was a little story about a kid in 1980s Britain trying to sort of find his way, and he gets in with some sort of racist skinheads, and it's just quite a good story about that sort of socially deprived time, and these guys trying to, and this, you know, sort of a tale of growing up, which is quite good. But, you know, more mainstream, I mean, Monty Python films.
Oh yeah.
You can't not love Life of Brian.
Oh, what about Full Monty? Did you like
Yes,
that?
Full
I can.
Monty was awesome.
That was incredibly awesome.
I was just thinking about that. I mean, some of the little films even are just, you know, they're just really nice. Like the Man Who Went Up a Hill Came Down a Mountain. I remember that one. That was kind of nice. And
you can't. We touched on this during the break. You can't leave out the Austin Powers series.
Oh, no.
You know, come on. You got to take pride in those, Ollie.
I absolutely do take pride in those. I mean, the way they can conceal his genitalia with food items in so many different ways is just amazing. I mean, they must have employed thousands of people just to think up different ways to hide that.
Do you have any particularly favorite quotes from that series, from that movie, Ollie?
Well, quotes that I can say on radio?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm bigger than you. I'm higher up the food chain. Get in my belly.
That's a good one. Yes, absolutely.
I like it when he goes, "No, I want my baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back." Brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, Fat Bart, he just has the best quotes in that film. He always, and then of course, shagadelic, baby, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't beat that. That's the sort of the British accent that the women go for. I mean, when I go to America, I just need to pull up more Austin Powers accents, and I'll just be rolling it.
That's right. That's
Absolutely. You're exactly right. You would fall right in the depths of all these Southern women, I'm telling you.
What
problem is, be careful what you get or what you ask for.
One of my favorite movies of all time had, I don't know whether it was made in Britain or the United States, but it's based on a Rudyard Kipling story and stars two British actors, which is The Man Who Would Be King, with Sean Connery and Michael Caine. Yes. I think that was
That's an excellent movie.
Great movie.
Yes.
Well, David, I got one.
Wait a minute. Everybody agreed with me on that? Maybe I better reconsider my position.
That's a great movie. The problem is you go back and grab super classics that we love. So, it's not hard for us to deny those.
Well, see, Tim, that's because I tried with movies just like cigars and fine whiskey. I only try to consume the best, and I leave the garbage for other people.
The problem is how do you know what's the best if you've never watched the junk, right, Ollie?
What?
I don't want to watch anybody's junk, thank you very much.
Ooh, a modern term from David Finzer.
Yes.
I picked that up from the Scott and Tim show.
Oh, yeah. You see, we're trying to bring him up to the curb. But anyways, listen, I want to do this one real quick. I know you've watched like every John Wayne movie, and you were talking about actors that might be your favorite. John Wayne is probably by far one of my favorite actors of all time. Grew up with my granddad watching him. What's your all-time greatest John Wayne movie?
His last one, The Shootist.
You can't do that. You got to go back with a classic, an actual country or Western movie.
That was a Western movie.
Yeah, it was.
Next one, Sea Chase, where he played. Do you know that one?
No, don't know that one. You would have to pick the obscure ones.
Well, you wanted me to go back. I went back.
The Cowboys.
The Cowboys was very good. I think he was great in True Grit and Rooster Cogburn.
He played Genghis Khan.
It was terrible in Genghis Khan. And of course the Green Beret, which, because Hollywood would not tell the truth about what was going on in Vietnam, he financed himself. So I really liked that movie as well.
Yeah, I liked the Green Beret movie. That was a good one by him too.
I think John Wayne was. Admittedly, John Wayne probably was not a great actor. John Wayne.
He played John Wayne.
John Wayne in every movie except True Grit.
Right.
For which I think he won an Oscar.
There are loads of actors who do that. Like Christian Bale. Do you watch any Christian Bale films? He just plays the same guy. He doesn't have any emotions. The dude just is. Somehow he's got into acting. And they just cast him, and he just sort of stands there.
Well, I remember they said the same thing about Katharine Hepburn once.
You brought that up because you're a good actor or you're a good presence when they take and they hire the whole cast to make you look taller. John Wayne did that in all his movies. All the cast had to be under 6 foot tall.
Yeah, Prince does that in all his music videos.
Well, Pierce Brosnan, they'd have him standing on a box. And people, they had special stages built for him because he's so short.
Pierce Brosnan?
Yeah, he's short.
It worked because I didn't know he was short.
Yeah.
Oh, go figure.
So I don't know. I think, okay, let me ask you an entirely different question. Do you think that the movie culture over the last 30 years, Ollie, you can go to whatever years back you remember, but do you think it's had a positive or a negative influence overall on society and on freedom in the world?
I like a lot of films are quite sort of freedom orientated. A lot of them are sort of bigging up what the individual does. I mean, I mentioned V for Vendetta, but even things like Avatar, the top grossing film ever. I mean, that was the evil corporation. I know that's slightly corporate, but that was basically a corporatist state, and that was the little guy standing up to the So they're basically staying up for the state. I mean, The Matrix had these guys fighting back.
I've seen parts of that.
Even The Dark Knight. I mean, it just showed how rubbish the police are, and you have an individual can stand up and change everything. So I think there are some good films, sort of freedom-orientated films.
For every good movie that has a good outcome or what you want it to push for, like Hunger Games, it showed a socialistic government trying to take over or a communistic government in the style of movie. For every one of those that's good, that tries to do good, there's bad movies out there as well that go the opposite direction. Avatar to me was a big tree hugger movie. I have that big feeling.
It was Dances with Wolves, right? It was the same basic thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're exactly right. The same Dances with
blue
Wolves
people
thing, just on a new age spin.
Yeah.
There are good movies and there are bad movies in every genre and every time frame. The only thing is now is I believe that Hollywood believes that their voice is stronger than the common American now, and the sad part is they're winning on a lot of fronts.
Okay, Mike, what do you think?
I think movies are third in effect on the culture, on Ollie's generation. I think they're affected most by music, and I think then they're affected by TV, and then I think movies come into play. But,
what about video games? Do you think they have a...
Yeah, I think video games do too, yeah. I mean, I don't know where that would fall on the spectrum. Probably equal with movies. Yeah, because they're certainly playing them all the time.
I think it was notable that that recently, because you know how films used to always gross so much, recently video games are starting to not only gross equal amounts to films, they're actually affecting film ratings. If you release your film at the same time as the new Call of Duty comes out, you'll expect lower number of people coming to see it.
Yeah, because the young people have something to do on the weekend instead of going to see the movie.
It's sort of changed the whole dynamic. That before it was just the film was there and people would flock to it. Now they've got to carefully shoehorn it in around other releases. So.
Okay, we got about 40 seconds. So, Mike, some words of wisdom?
Well, I grew up in Atlanta, so it was required every year for us to stay up on Sunday night and watch Gone with the Wind all the way to the end of the movie.
Well, I've watched it 17 times because I hope eventually that it's going to be New York burning instead of Atlanta.
The odds are saying that one time the South should win.
And real quick, Mike, you got to remember that all Christmas Eve and Christmas, we got the Christmas Story, 24 hours.
The Christmas Story, Peter Billingsley, awesome.
Okay, I'll stick with, like I said, the Miracle on 34th Street. Anyway, we're time to go. Remember, you only have 3 choices. Give it and live like a serf, fight back, or get out. This is David Finzer for Truth.